about our team. I know the worst thing that a visual and sound team want is attention, and but we're grateful for their diligence and I thought Dave was, as the deacon in charge of budgets for this, I thought he was going to appeal to you for better equipment. And everyone said, amen. So moved. Better equipment's coming. All right, good deal. We love it. Okay, so Angie and I had the privilege of taking a trip to Israel thanks to some dear friends. Mike Leake is here, by the way, one of those dear friends, and is his wife Nancy here too? Okay, good. Mike and my friend Jim Musgrave and Clark Spiker, they're wonderful friends, and that was their brainchild to provide us this wonderful opportunity. And then the church came and said, we want to participate as well. And so we had the opportunity to go to Israel, and we're thankful, so grateful for the trip that you afforded us. It was a wonderful thing. So I want to see if, it works. Okay, good. Okay, so you can see that the title here is Israel, Where God Came Down. When you look at this map, if you look at a world map, you could put a stamp over this little piece of land, and it would cover it entirely. Yet it is an absolutely critical and crucial piece of property in our world, because for the sole reason that God came down. This is where God chose to come and dwell among us. And in Galatians chapter 4, verse 4, it says this, "But when the fullness of time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law." Help me out there, bud. I don't know. There we go. Back me up. Well, you can leave it there. Okay, so Angie and I on Saturday, we departed for Israel. We were very excited, as you can see with that picture, and you can help me with this, Wesley. Thank you. My clicker's not working. We were very excited to head out and jump in the air, and that's in our Angie's smiling there because we were about ready to take off for an 11-hour flight, and we made it, and I think we made it in 10 and a half hours, right? So that was a wonderful trip over, and we just enjoyed that time together. And then that picture right here, this picture right here is over the Mediterranean Sea. So we're just about ready to land in Tel Aviv. You can go to the next one, Wesley. So Tel Aviv is right here. This is where we landed. And that's where our adventure began. We started in Tel Aviv one night, and we were there just to get acquainted with the rest of the group. There were 11 of us all together that were traveling on this journey, and it was we're 11 of us, and I'll show you a picture in a second of the 60-passenger bus that we had. So 60 passengers. Not 60, there was just 11. What a wonderful blessing to be able to stretch out into that bus together. And so why don't you go to the next one, Wesley? That gives you a little closer appreciation for where Tel Aviv is, which is formerly Joppa. You can see that right there, Joppa. Next. Okay, so our first stop was to Caesarea Maritima, okay? And now, before we get there, I asked Angie if she just has any thoughts that she does not want to be up here, by the way. But any thoughts about the trip in general and just some impact? You want to just jump in? Okay, that's cool. All right. Oops. Go back. Yep. Okay, so we traveled from Joppa the first day all the way up to Caesarea Maritima. Okay, Caesarea Maritima, this was built by Herod, where the Roman governor Pontius Pilate based his seat of government. This is where also Cornelius, if you remember from Acts chapter 10, Cornelius lived there, and he was baptized here, actually. And this is where Paul embarked on his journey to Tarsus in Acts chapter 9, verse 30. And this is also where Philip preached in Acts chapter 8, verse 40. Acts chapter 8, verse 40 says, "But Philip found himself at Astus, and as he passed through, he preached the gospel to all the towns until he came here." All right, so Caesarea, that's where we were at. Next. Okay, this is the 60-passenger bus that we got to travel around on. It looks kind of like a bug. He's got these weird things here. But they're everywhere in Israel. Honestly, one of Israel's main sources of revenue is tourism, as you can imagine. And so they do their very best to keep things nice and safe and make sure you feel safe. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Go ahead and the next one, Wesley. This is Alone. He was our tour guide, Alone. That's a sad picture of Alone. He really wasn't sad, but he's a wonderful guy. You have anything you want to say about him? Not yet. Okay, stand by.
I liked him a lot.
Okay, she liked him a lot. He was a wonderful man. A Jew. His parents were here in America and moved to Israel, and he was born in Israel. And so now what's very interesting about Alone is he has a little bit of a different accent than most Israelites. He sounds more like Tevye from Fiddler on the Roof. Remember Tevye? So he'd say things like, well, it could be this, it could be that, I don't know, it's up to you, you decide, that kind of thing. So he was, but wonderful. And this little deal right here, he has a little microphone, and we had little earbuds, so we could hear everything he said from hundreds of yards. And so it was really nice to be able to stay connected that way. Go ahead at the next one, Wesley. I point this out here. This is an arch. And the Romans were the first ones to introduce arches in architecture. So I thought that was really interesting. Go ahead. And this right here is, you'll see in a second, we're going to go into a theater. Go ahead, Wesley. This is the theater that we're walking into right here. Go ahead. And this is 2,000 years old. It's pretty amazing. So the seats right here, the covers are new, but underneath, right there and down, are all from 2,000 years ago. So it's pretty amazing. And they still use this theater today. If you go to the next slide, they had a concert coming up in the not too distant future. One of the things that Alone taught us about the Roman culture is that they did two things to keep peace, Pax Romana, right? Keep peace in their world. And one of them was circus, and the other one was bread. Circus and bread, because they wanted law and order. Remember the TV show Law and Order? They want law and order, and so they offered circus and bread. What does that mean, circus and bread? Circus means keep them entertained. Bread means keep them fed. So circus and bread helped to keep people content and contributed to Pax Romana, the Roman peace. And so their theater was not like Greek theater. Their theater was much more slapstick. It would include nudity and all kinds of silliness just to keep the attention. By the way, does that sound familiar? Sounds like kind of our world, doesn't it? Right? And then they would keep them fed and keep them content. So that's, whereas the Greek world, they were much more cerebral and philosophical, and we still have their plays today, right? That they created back then. We don't have so much from Rome because it was just goofiness and silliness. Okay, go ahead, next. All right, this is very interesting here. Pontius Pilate, remember I said this is where Pontius Pilate was the seat of his government? Go to the next. This is an actual, can you see Pilate here? This is an actual stone that has Pilate's name on it. I thought, isn't that amazing, right? I'm going to point this out as we go along here, but I want you to understand something, if you get nothing else, because I don't want this just to be a cool slideshow. I want you to understand that you have a faith that is not rooted in some sort of hokey, made-up thing. You have a faith that is rooted in history. And the governor Pilate actually existed, and he allowed our Savior to go to the cross. Okay, next. All right, this is the lower palace, Herod's lower palace, which is very interesting here. And go to the next one, Wesley. This is actually part of the palace, and this is Herod's freshwater pool that he would swim in. Which I thought was cool. Okay, next. All right. Forgive me, I know this is church, but do you have any idea what this is? You know what's going on here? Okay, this is Grace. She was on our trip, and this is Michael, okay? Grace and Michael are sitting on something. It's a latrine. This is how they went potty back then. Okay, so So obviously, well, can you go to the next one, Wesley? Okay, so this gives you maybe a better, I thought this was fascinating. Maybe this is where my mind goes, but I thought it was very interesting nonetheless because these, you would sit on these things and there would be water flowing down this trough, and then they would use sea sponges to cleanse themselves. So they'd dip in the water and cleanse themselves. I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. Okay, it's not very spiritual, but well, it is. All right, next. Okay, that's a picture of what went on. Not that you needed that. So go ahead, next. Okay, this is really cool because this is, do you remember what this place is called? You got to talk into that. Yeah, so this is actually a chariot race would go around here. Okay, you can go to the next one. Yeah, right here. It's the chariot races from the Meta Prima. So they would have these chariot races going around. I just think that's really cool. Next. Okay, now from there we went to Mount Carmel. And so we went from Caesarea up to Mount Carmel. By the way, somebody said, "Oh, I hope you enjoyed your vacation." This was no vacation. Okay, we were like up at the crack of dawn, and we went all day long, and it was an amazing study trip, and I recommend you do it if you can. Okay, so we went, sorry about that. We went to Mount Carmel, and go to the next one. What happened at Mount Carmel? Does anybody remember? The prophets of Baal, remember that? And Ezekiel and the prophets of Baal, next. And so this is a beautiful panoramic, and it doesn't do justice. I mean, when you're here, so I'm sorry about that. But this is a panoramic of Megiddo. Now, does anybody know here what Megiddo? It's the significance of Megiddo. Yeah, the valley where Armageddon is going to happen. Okay, so this is that valley. Go ahead, next. It gives you a little right here, which says that. And what's cool on top of it, and by the way, in Israel, wherever there's some sort of a holy site, they build all these churches and kind of ruin it, but in my opinion. But they have all these ornate churches and everything. But this is a church. We're standing on top of a church platform, and go ahead, the next one. Oh, sorry, I guess there was nothing like. But you get to see, different angles of where from Mount Carmel, where Samaria is, where Jerusalem is, and so forth. Okay, next, Nazareth. So we went from Mount Carmel to Nazareth. We can go ahead to Nazareth. This is the Mount of Precipice. Are you familiar with the Mount of Precipice? Well, tradition says this is where Jesus jumped off the mount to escape being captured. Now, we know the Bible has something different to say about that. Why don't you go ahead, Wesley? Luke 4:29 says, "And they rose up and drove him out of the town and brought him to the brow of the hill on which their town was built, so that they could throw him down the cliff. But passing through their midst, he went away." So somehow they took passing through their midst and turned that into he jumped. I don't think that's what happened, but I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but he did pass through their midst. Next. Okay, so this was a video. I don't think the video is working, is it, Wesley? We're going to test it. It was a cool video. I have some cool videos that are not working, which makes me sad. Okay, so go back. So this was actually, no, right there. This would have been a panoramic of what Jesus would have viewed of all of Nazareth and just looking over Nazareth. And our tour guide just said something very interesting. He said, imagine Jesus coming up here as a youth, just looking over where all the stories of the Old Testament took place, and you could see all of the different things that took place as Jesus grew in wisdom and in stature. Okay, next. Okay, this is the Mount. This is a church of where it's called the Church of the Annunciation. The Church of the Annunciation. What is the Annunciation? Anybody know? Quiz. Where an angel came to Mary and did what? Yeah, told her she was going to have a baby. So that's the Church of the Annunciation. Again, they make a church everywhere. And so next. Go ahead, next. This is inside the church, and there's all the way around, there's pictures of Mary all the way around. Next, we move from Nazareth to the northern border of Syria. So go ahead and switch here. So Nazareth is way over here. We traveled all the way up to, I guess I got that wrong. Can you try the next one? Well, just leave it there. That's fine. I think I got them mixed up. But it's actually That's right. That's where the star is. So that's where we were, okay? And so where we are standing in the next picture, Syria is in our background right there. So that's Syria right there. And Alon made the point. He said, do you guys feel unsafe? And none of us felt unsafe. He said it's perfectly safe. And we, there are times where there's wars and we have problems. We keep our borders, and he gave us a really long lecture, really helpful lecture on geopolitical stuff, and it was very informative and interesting. But he said, for the most part, it's pretty safe. He said, what we do is we get newscasters come up and they put on all their gear and their helmets and then because they want to sensationalize what's going on when in fact it's not happening in that way. So he said it was pretty interesting that he pointed that out. So we felt very safe. I have a very weird look on my face because this was the first time I ever in my life used a selfie stick, and so there you go. Next. All right, we went from there to Caesarea Philippi. So not Caesarea Maritima, but Caesarea Philippi. So if we go to the map next, so we were here and we traveled back over here. So Caesarea Philippi, and this is a very interesting place, Caesarea Philippi. Feel free to jump in anytime. Okay, there's 2 spots she's going to do. Okay, so Caesarea Philippi, and let's see. Okay. I want to I'm off my notes here, so I don't know what I'm talking about. All right, so go to the next one. Banias or Banias is what it's, Banias? Yeah, Banias is what it's called today, and that name has stuck. Go ahead next. And this is some of the cliffs that we were able to walk up, and I have a couple more. There's water right here. This is going to start to feed into the Sea of Galilee, and then it's going to feed into the Jordan River. Okay, next. This is the sanctuary of Pan, and this is very interesting. Next slide. So the conquest of Alexander the Great brought the Greeks to the east and to Banias. The Greeks were taken by the natural beauty of the site, touched particularly by the cave in which the springs welled. It is no wonder that they sanctified this cave, dedicating it to Pan, god of the forest, and the shepherds. Thus came the name Banias, later becoming Banias in Arabic pronunciation. Towards the end of the 1st century, the Romans incorporated Banias into Herod's empire. To show his esteem, Herod built a temple near Banias Springs and named it for the Roman Emperor Augustus, Herod's son. Philippus established the seat of his rule here, calling the town Caesarea Philippi. Okay, but they continue to call it Banias today. So that just gives a little history. Next. Okay, this is that place for Pan. It was really an interesting place. Next. Okay, go ahead. So we went from there to the Mount of Beatitudes. Next. So you can see we're Caesarea Philippi. We traveled down to the Mount of Beatitudes. We're getting closer to the Sea of Galilee. So take a look at the next slide. This is what is purported to be the Mount of Beatitudes. And what happened at the Mount of Beatitudes? That's where Jesus, in Matthew 5, 6, and 7, and if you've never read the Beatitudes, please do. It's a powerful sermon. But this is purported to be, and again, what's on the Mount of Beatitudes? Another church. You got to have a church, apparently. And so beautiful scenery there. Next, Capernaum. Okay, so we went from the Mount of Beatitudes to Capernaum. And go ahead. This is the town of Jesus. This is where Jesus spent a lot of his time in Galilee. Next. Okay. The late 4th century A.D. white synagogue built upon the remains of the synagogue of Jesus. So this is the synagogue where Jesus went in and said, I am Jesus, right? Or he read the Isaiah passage. Okay, next. This is Alon talking to us in here. So you see some of this stuff. This is all Byzantine, which means came later on. The actual synagogue is probably underneath, according to Alon, probably underneath all of this. But this is where Jesus spent time. Okay, this is interesting. Next slide. Right here is the house of Peter. One of the things that I was struck by in going to Israel is how small everything is. I mean, distance-wise. It's not, when you look at the Sea of Galilee, it's about as big as Lake Tahoe, okay? It's not very big. So you consider, it's not hard to figure out where Peter probably lived in in Capernaum. And they tradition says this was the area. This is actually built up around it. It was somewhere in there. And go back one. Guess what this is? It's a church. They built a church over top of it, right? Because you got to have a church building there, apparently. All right, next. This is me. I'm touching the Sea of Galilee, and it was just such a thrilling experience. I mean, it wasn't. It was just touching water. But what happened next is I actually walked on water, but Angie didn't get the picture. No, I'm kidding. I did not do that. But it was really cool. It was neat to be able to touch the Sea of Galilee. Go ahead, next. Yes, that's coming. Yep. Tabgha. Okay, next. This is here. Go ahead. This is where Jesus did the feeding of the 5,000. Okay, the loaves and the fishes. And so he was able to do that there, it's just amazing to think about if you had a time machine to be able to go back during that point. And as you can see, we were just here, and we just come down here, and we'll work our way around. But pretty breathtaking. Go ahead. Next. This is my wife and me at the same place, and we're right inside of, or right just outside of a church. Yeah. Next. This was my lunch. Isn't that cool? Now, they have those they eat that way in the Philippines, don't you, Jim? That's right. They call it St. Peter's fish, but it's tilapia. And so we all had tilapia. Angie didn't. No, Angie did not. She didn't like the looks of that. So she had chicken strips. Those were made by Judas. Anyway, so it was delightful fish. Next. Guineasaur. Okay, that might sound a little familiar. That's right here on the Sea of Galilee. Next. So this is Yigal Alon Center. So this is where we're going to go to sail on the Sea of Galilee. Interestingly enough, this place was named after this guy. There's a connection where his father had a real affinity for the gentleman that built that building, and knew him actually, and he ended up naming his son Alon after that man that was in charge of he was a general in the Israeli army. Next. This is our boat. Now, to say we sailed on the Sea of Galilee is a bit of a misnomer. We boated on the Sea of Galilee. There were no sails involved, but it was cool nonetheless. Next. This is the Sea of Galilee, and this is where we were just at. Next. This was a video I was going to show you, but it's not working. So pretend that it's moving water. Next. Now this is where I believe the mount of what was it? The fishes and loaves, I think, were up here. So pretty cool.
This is where I will say something.
Yes, please.
You'll notice so many of the other pictures of the areas of, where they built churches up and it was all touristy. This was one of my favorites because we went on a boat and we went on the Sea of Galilee. We were on the same body of water that Jesus was and that the disciples had fished on. And, the tourism wasn't there. And it was a very cool thing to just be out on that water and imagine a few things. Like it was very calm and it was hot and sunny. But all of a sudden, a really strong wind went up. We were all eating our hair, and I thought, okay, that is how quickly a storm can come on the Sea of Galilee. And I could imagine if it had been raining and, if the boat had been rolling and at night, I could imagine that story, and that was a very interesting point for me.
Well said. Yeah, winds travel down the mountainside, and the waves kick up real quick, and it can be really treacherous. So it was really neat, and we saw that later too. All of us, we were traveling, and we could still see the Sea of Galilee, and whitecaps were happening, and it was pretty rough out there. So that was after we had the chance. Next. This is cool. This is the boat. They call it the boat of Jesus. We don't know that it is the boat of Jesus, but this boat is dated to be 2,000 years old, and according to according to Alon, he said it's statistically impossible to think that Jesus did not know the owner of this boat. because it was such a small area, and it's dated, carbon dated right back. So it was pretty interesting. Next. That's just another view of it. But this would have been a traditional fishing boat that he would have used. Yeah. Well, it would have come up. But there's a whole, you probably can YouTube it. There's a video on how they retrieved that boat. It's pretty neat. This is where we stayed on this side of the Sea of Galilee. Next. So this is from our hotel, and this right here then is this is Sea of Galilee, and this is Tiberias. Okay, so which is on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. It was a wonderful stay there. Next. And then we traveled down to here. Next. On our way, so that star there is where we're going to see some baptisms. But on our way, this site and the next one, go to the next picture, this is purported where the swine went over the cliff into the Sea of Galilee, and they have said that the sea might have come up to this point at that point, and it's receded, so could be. So that's one of the spots that they declare. So I took a picture of that as we were traveling in the bus. Next, Yardenit. Next, so this is where we're going to, go ahead. We're going to see some baptisms. Go ahead, Wesley. So welcome to Yardenit, the baptism. Now this is one of two sites. This is the more commercialized site. Next. By the way, before we went in, these are olives from an olive tree that was out there. It's kind of cool. We didn't eat them because they weren't ready. Next. This is our friend Bruce and Suzette. They are from Jamaica, and I have a wonderful video of them, and Bruce has this wonderful big ha 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 voice, but I don't think the video is going to work. But those were the two out of our crew that wanted to rededicate their faith, and so they went in and got baptized. Next. They baptized each other. Yeah, people don't baptize there. You have to, if you go in and you're by yourself, you just do baptize yourself. So they baptized each other, and it was cool. Next. This was the video that's not working. Next. And this is my wife and I. And we did not get baptized. So. No, we did not. No, it was kind of chilly, and we're wimps. Next. Biet Shian. Next. So we were here. That's where they were baptized, and we came down. And this is where we're at. This is a Roman colony. This is a Roman site, actually. And go to the next site there, or the next slide. So this is a site where it's called the ruins of Bet Shean, and it's a city mentioned in the Bible that later was destroyed in an earthquake in 749 A.D. This is where the Philistines hung the bodies of Saul and his sons in this particular city. And so it's still being excavated today. Go ahead, next. So this is in a bathhouse, and these are pillars that there would actually have been a floor on top of it that there would be hot water going through here, and it would steam up underneath it. Next. This gives you a different perspective, so you can see that. So it's pretty cool. Next. This is actually another theater in that same area, and two of the people on our tour, they said it has really good acoustics, and so two of our people sang Amazing Grace, and it was cool. That's another direction of it. Next. We went from there to the mountains of Samaria. I'm cramming all this, 7 days into, as quickly as I can, but I mean, you offered for me to go, so I figured you'd want to see this stuff. Okay, so this was stark to me, startling. Just as we were traveling down, these are the mountains of Samaria. This is where Jesus would have gone through to meet the woman at the well and to lead her to Christ and reach that town for Christ. Pretty amazing. Next. And this is just another mountain of Samaria. Next. This is where we had lunch. Amazing food over in Israel. Angie was worried about it. You want to say something about that?
I was concerned about eating food that we weren't used to eating, but it was so good. Yeah. And there was a lot of really fresh stuff, so.
Yeah.
it was
So
really
we
good.
went here. This is a hole in the wall, and the food was amazing. I had shawarma, and she had falafel. And so. Oh, we had lamb here. Yeah, you're right. It was really good. Next. Okay, so now we've come down, we're traveling down by the mountains of Samaria, and we're coming near Jerusalem. So this was actually the map on my phone, and I took a screenshot of it. I just thought it was so amazing that on my phone I can take a picture of, the map, the live map of where we're at, and it's actually a place that we've studied in the Bible for all of, 20, 30 years of my life. Pretty amazing. So next. So we came down here, and we're turning. We went by Jericho. I'm happy to report the walls are back up. And then we headed into Jerusalem. Next. This was a picture outside of our window of just the city of Jerusalem. Pretty cool. Just a modern city. These bricks are interesting. A lot of the buildings look the same because, I forget, do you remember there was a time where the English were running Jerusalem, and they wanted all the buildings in Jerusalem to resemble the temple, just as an homage to the temple. And so they enforced them using the same bricks for that. Next. Oh, go ahead.
That is still
Is it
the
still?
regulation.
Yeah.
When you build something, it has to be that white brick.
And this is the I can't remember the name. Yeah, the mosque, the dome, yep, on the mount. Next. Okay, so we went from there, we got into our hotel, and then we went down to Bethlehem. And so we were here in Jerusalem. Again, everything is very close. So when you read about Jesus going from Bethany after he raised Lazarus from the dead and he came into Jerusalem, it's not very far. It's like a mile and a half. I mean, so it's not a long walk, right? So we went down to Bethlehem. Next. This was a panoramic view of Bethlehem. Next. This is my beautiful wife with Bethlehem behind us. Next. This is the place where it's the Church of the Nativity, okay? Again, I don't know how they know this. I have my suspicions. But this is supposedly the exact spot where Jesus was born. Okay. I don't know how they know that, but that's what tradition says. We do know we're in Bethlehem. We do know that the Bible says clearly that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. That's good enough for me, but it's interesting nonetheless. Next. So in this church, you can see all of this ornate stuff here, right? So there's Greek Orthodox, and then there's Catholic. So there's like in the same building, Greek Orthodox and Catholic, and they have services going on all the time. And they go back and forth between Greek Orthodox and Catholic. So when you see all of these ornate things hanging, that's a sign that it's a Greek Orthodox part. Next. So then from there we went into Old Jerusalem. Next. This is just a picture of Old Jerusalem just to give us a frame of reference. This is where the temple is. This is where the mosque is now. But this is where the temple was. And back in the day, the temple, Solomon's temple, was glorious. It was an amazing temple. And so, next. So this is where we entered. Could you go back? So that's right about here. Next. So this is where we entered. This is a modern map of the Old Jerusalem. Next. Right here. Okay, next. And so this is the Tower of David. So you walk right in there, and it's the Tower of David. It's pretty amazing. Next. And then Alon is teaching us about the tower and what's going on there. So we're just entering into the city. Next. The Via della Rosa. This is what's kind of cool. This is where Jesus walked, right? This is where, Bruce, the guy that got baptized, they said, what do you want most on this trip? And Bruce said, I just want to walk where Jesus walked. And so we did get those opportunities, which was really neat. Next. Again, this is Via della Rosa, just more of the same. Next. Again, more. And St. Mark Street, so I thought that was cool. Next. I thought this was very interesting. This tile here is purported to be the stone that Jesus walked on. This is newer, but this is the tile or the stone that Jesus walked on. Now, we should probably talk to them because Michigan can't make roads for nothing. But, this has been around for 2,000 years. They got something on us. All right, next. Here's a close-up of that. So, pretty cool. Next. This is Simon, the guy that helped Jesus carry the cross. So they have a church dedicated to him. Next. Now we're going to go into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. So that means where he was buried. Okay. Now there's two sites where Jesus supposedly was buried. We're going to look at both of them. There's a little ladder here. Angie's going to tell us about that in a second. Next. Okay. So this is actually outside of what I just showed you. There's that ladder. Okay. So this is the entrance into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And what's really cool about this ladder, you want to share? This is kind of neat. The Armenians.
I don't know if I remember it all, but do you notice looking at this that there's it's not unified? It's not like one beautiful building that somebody built. It's like this religion did this, that religion did that, and they all had their own things. I forget why the ladder had to do with bringing food up and stuff. I don't know if they
For the Armenians, yep.
I don't know if they couldn't be in someone else's area.
Yes.
I don't remember. Okay. So once everything was a little bit more, they kind of decided, okay, we'll be unified. The ladder, they left there because they want to be remembered and they want everybody to notice it. Mm-hmm.
So it was their way of PR. They wanted that was their advertising.
And I don't know.
The Armenian church.
I don't know
was
how
that
many
way.
pictures you've got inside here, but it's mind blowing how this little section is Catholic and this little section is
Greek Orthodox.
And this little section, everybody has to have their own
next
piece of the pie. It's crazy.
This is just a schema or a mosaic rather of the death of Christ. You can see that there. Next, this is kind of weird. This is supposedly the stone that they laid Jesus on. I don't know. And people will come up and touch it and pray over it and all that. And I just get all creeped out about that stuff personally. But it is interesting nonetheless.
They have up above hanging, you can see, I think they have holy oil dripping on it or something. So people will go up to that and actually lay their whole face on it and their hands and everything and kiss it.
And supposedly,
and
it heals people if you pray.
They'll take the oil to friends.
Yeah, I don't buy it for a minute. Anyway. Next. So this is what Angie's talking about. So over here is the Greek Orthodox. Back here is the Catholic, and it's run by the Franciscans. Okay, the Catholic Franciscans, right? The Pope is Franciscan right now, and so that's the order that runs that particular deal. And then there's the Armenians, and I think they're over on the other side. This is actually the supposed place where Jesus is born. Next, or buried rather. Next. So right here, that's Alone's head, but he's looking into the window where you can see the tomb. So again, they've enshrined all of this stuff. And that was really, I don't know if the word disappointing is right, but it was just like, I don't know. I don't even know how to describe it, but it was interesting nonetheless. Next, they found another spot in this place that could be the place of the burial of Jesus. And so we got to go and actually walk into the tomb. Next. So this is Bruce going into the tomb. Next. This is where they would lay a body. They would lay a body here. Next. Angie did not go in there. No. Next. So we're outside of that. So those were two places within the same church where they purported that Jesus was buried. What's interesting is that particular room, if you picture it in your mind, there was that room that we were all standing outside of. Well, the Armenians, the Roman Catholics, and the Greek Orthodox there was a fire that took place in that room. And so they all blamed each other. And so they decided just to leave it alone. Nobody could come to an agreement on who's going to repair it because it was your fault. No, it was your fault. So they just left it empty. So that's why you could go in and nobody claims anything with it anymore. This is just a map of the city outside. Next. This is the pool of Bethesda, if you remember that. And of course, what's there? A church. Next. Right? I think it's really fascinating. I just want to see this text with you. It says, one man was there who had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be healed?" And the sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. While I am going, another steps down before me." And Jesus said to him, "Get up, take your bed, and walk." And at once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now that was the day of the Sabbath. So this is actually the pool of Bethesda. Next, right there. So it's in here. It's dried up now. Next. This is just another angle of that. Again, I just think it's fascinating that there's actually places that correlate with the Bible. Next. Okay, so now we're going to leave the city and we're going to head out the Lion's Gate. Next. So this is a door it's a pretty thick door that closes to close the Lion's Gate. I thought that was interesting. Next. These are the lions outside the Lion's Gate. Next. There's another one there. Next. I thought this was really, I don't know, I just think this is cool. Our Bible uses these words. And here they are on signs in modern Israel. I think that's pretty cool. So we're going to head down this way. Go ahead, next. We're heading down this road. And one thing I want you to remember, and this is just an interesting fact. When they're talking about the disciples there in Galilee, so they're in the north, and they say they're going to go up to Jerusalem. How do they go up to Jerusalem if they're in the north? Because Jerusalem is on a mountain. They are literally going up to Jerusalem. So it's not north, south, east, west. It's going up. That's what it means. So we're going to go down, and we're going to head towards the Mount of Olives. We're not going there yet, though. Hang on. Next. So this is the look back at the Lion's Gate. Next. This is would be to the right, and so you can see the city wall, and the temple is up there. Next. This is interesting. We're going to go to the Garden of Gethsemane, which was donated by the Franciscans. Next. I just wanted you to see that. Next. This is actually the Garden of Gethsemane, where the olive trees and Jesus was. Next. There's another olive tree. It's a beautiful garden. It's one of the places that's kind of untouched. They have it surrounded by fences, so that's kind of neat. Next. And this one here is purported to be 2,000 years old, this olive tree, and it's pretty massive. And then next to it is next, yep, there you go, church, there you go. This is the Church of All Nations. It's an interesting mosaic up there. There's a lot of this stuff. It's interesting. But inside, Church of All Nations. Next, even America has a little mosaic inside the Church of All Nations. Who knew? Next. This is looking up, so we are east of the Old Jerusalem, right? So we're walking. Next. I thought this was cool too. On a bus station, Mount of Olives. Weird. Next. So here we are. We're walking this way, and we're going to enter the Dung Gate. Sounds pretty gross. Next. Next. Now this was a video I was so excited to show you. It's actually a video of a bar mitzvah. And they have bar mitzvahs all the time, and they have this cool Jewish music, and they're all, Chava Nagila stuff, and it was so cool. I can show it to you later, perhaps. But it's working. Is there a sound, or is that too much to ask? Okay. There you go. Listen. So it's this awesome celebration,
Underneath that little canopy that they're carrying
canopy
is
right
a
here.
13-year-old boy who is having his bar mitzvah.
Yeah.
There were like three of them.
And there was three of them going on when we were there. Yeah, it's so cool. Really neat. Okay, you can go to the next one. So this is actually, so we had to go through security to get in here, to go to the Wailing Wall. So they had to check all of us and everything. They're very big on security over there, obviously. And so here's the military there. Next. So this picture is a picture of the Wailing Wall. Okay. Now, men, I want to say, so men are allowed here, women here. They do not, did I get it wrong? Oh, I'm sorry. Men here, women here. Okay? So very interesting. Next. So we're going to go down to the wall in a minute here. Next. So you can see this is where the women are at. Next. All right, you can see this guy. This is traditional Orthodox Jew. He's got the sideburns, they're curly, they got the cool hat and prayer shawl and all of that. You see a lot of that in Jerusalem. Okay, not hardly any of that in Galilee, but so more traditional down into Jerusalem. Next, this is the Wailing Wall again. This is where the Talmud is stored. Next, or the Torah rather, right there. Okay, next. So this little guy right here is being bar mitzvahed. So the people coming in, and then they come down here, and then he reads out of the Talmud or the Torah, and
Over the wall,
so you
'cause
see the
they're
women?
not allowed on that side. So
right.
they're
So
all
there's the women,
looking
and they're
over.
throwing candy at him. It's really interesting, right? So, but you can see how conservative they are in that sense. Women on one side, men on the other. That's the way they roll. Okay, next. Okay, next. All right, now they're praying. One more. All right, now he's taking the Torah. It's this big ornate Torah, and they bring it over back to the box here. Okay, next. And now he's putting it back inside. So pretty cool. Next. There it is, closed up. And there people are praying up against the wall. Next. Yeah, we're getting there. This is actually, so this is the Jewish side. This is the Muslim side. So you have to go through that door there in order to get into the Muslim side. Okay? So, next. This is just some more cool pictures of them praying. There's another younger Orthodox Jew. Next. Okay, this is the phylacteries that you read about in the Bible. The phylacteries that contain the Shema, right? Right? And literally, they put it on your head, put it on your hands, put it on your door, right? All of that. They literally wear them. And so when you open that up, and he opened one in another spot, they opened it up, and there's a scroll with the text on it. It's pretty interesting. So they are very much literalists. Next. That's my hand. And this is right here. These are all prayers that you could write out and stuff into the prayer or the Wailing Wall. So a lot of people do that. And then they collect them, I don't remember how often, and then they bury them on a particular hill, up on the mountain. Yep. Next. That's just the Hebrew Scriptures. Next. This is alone, and he's getting left arm phylactery with this leather strap, and it's to remind you that your left hand typically is weaker, and you need the strength of the Lord, and you need His Word. Okay? So some of those things were, and this guy was really cool. I mean, he was telling us all these things, and I'm like, amen, amen. And then he's like, he gets to the end of it, and he's talking about how, we want to be people of the book, and that so we can be nice to other people and kind, and there was no punch. There was no point, right? He had no point. So that we can just be a good influence in the world. That was kind of the point. And so you can see Alone has it up here and on his arm. Next. Then we're going to do this quick, but we actually went underground to the rest of the temple. Go ahead, next. She gave us a tour. This is the picture of the temple. So you saw, go ahead, next. This is part of the wall, the western wall, but it's underground now. And so we got to go under, and this thing weighs 1.2 million pounds. This one section of the wall, 1.2 million pounds. They said it weighs like 100 elephants, is how they determined it. Next. This is a can't think of the word. That's not a church. It's the Jewish version of a church. Help me out here. Synagogue. Hey, yeah. All right, so this is a synagogue under the ground next to the wall. Next. There's just another version of it. Next. It's really quite beautiful. And then you turn around and you see the wall again. Next. So just to give you perspective, this is where the Wailing Wall is. We went over here, and then we came back, and then we were here underground for the rest of the wall. Yeah.
I don't know how many of you understand what the Wailing Wall is or what the Western Wall is. This whole square here that the temple is sitting on is it's the Temple Mount, okay? So when we talk about the wall, it's the wall of the Temple Mount, not the wall of the temple. The temple was up on top of that. Of course, the temple isn't there anymore. But the western wall would have been the wall that is right on the other side of the Holy of Holies in the temple. So people have it in their mind that this western wall is
It's the closest.
the holiest place. It's the closest you can get to God. That's why
that's-
they
that's
go
why
and
it's
they
a big
pray
deal. That's
on
why
the
it- yeah.
wall and put the
It's a great
prayers
point.
there. Because it would have been on that western side where the Holy of Holies in the temple was.
All
I
right.
didn't know that. I mean, that was very interesting to learn all that.
All right, we are way over time. Do you want me to stop? If you got to go, that's fine. Okay, next. I do apologize. Today's just been a weird day. Okay, this is the other one, Garden Tomb. This is where I think that the Lord would have been buried next. So that give you perspective here, right here. Garden Tomb, alternative site. Next. Next. So this is, you can see this skull here. Next. So eye, nose. They're saying this is Golgotha, right? This the stone, right, or where Calvary was taking place. Next, and now you can see it right here. The nose kind of fell off a little bit, but that's where it's at. And now there's a bus garage outside. Pretty amazing. Next, this is a picture of the tomb. Next. This is the tomb today. This was the guide that was helping us. He was from England, and he straight up shared the gospel, and I loved it. Next. Next. So this is the tomb, a diagram of the tomb. You walk in, and Jesus would have been buried here or here, but probably here because when Peter looked into the room, he could see the linen cloths, right? So this tomb makes a whole lot of sense to me. Next. This is a trough here where the stone would be, right? That they would, because the stone would be a circular stone that would roll. Next. Yeah. So this is where that would have been. There would have been a stone on top that he would have laid on that. Next. It's a better picture of it. Next. This is the other side. Next. That's a picture of what the stone would have looked like. Next. Do not be afraid. You came seeking for Jesus of Nazareth, who was crucified, but he is not here, for he has risen. And praise the Lord for that. Next. This is a minaret, a Muslim minaret. I thought that was just interesting. Next. This is where we're going to stand on the Mount of Olives. Next. So this is a perspective. We're up on the Mount of Olives. We're looking down of where the temple would be, right? That's the whole old Jerusalem. And you know what these are? Graves. Yep. So Orthodox Jews want to be buried there, as close.
They want to be the first to rise. That's why they're right there up on the top. And I think that is a graveyard.
Yeah, it is. It's a literal
they're
graveyard.
not underground because
Nope.
they want to be as close as possible.
Yep. Pretty amazing. Next. Okay, we'll just fly through these. Next. This is a model, 50th scale model of the entire city of Jerusalem at the time of Jesus. So this is the temple. It gives you a perspective of what we just looked at from the Mount of Olives. That's the temple. Yep. Next. Next. This is the upper room, supposedly. And also, tradition says the tomb of David. Next. Next. This is the road where Jesus traveled from the Kidron Valley up to being crucified. Next. Next. This is what they're saying is these are the stones that he would have walked on. Next. Next. Masada. We're almost done. Masada. So we went from Jerusalem down to Masada. This was very interesting. I don't know if you have heard of the story of Masada, but I would encourage you to look it up. And it was a Jewish holdout when the Romans were overtaking Jerusalem. Next. So it's a national park. Next. So we traveled up on cable cars. Next. That was actually a Roman, where the Roman fort was, because they were trying to take over Masada and they couldn't win because this is such an impenetrable fortress. Next. This is up at the top. Next. These are one of the walls up there. So Herod actually built a palace up on Masada. It was really cool. Next. There's another portion of that. Next. This is one of the examples of Herod's palace. And you can see how far up we are. It's very high up. Next. And this gives you some perspective. That's the Dead Sea back there. Okay? No. And then this is Qumran. We went to Qumran. We're almost done, folks. Qumran, next. So this is where Masada is. We traveled up the Dead Sea to Qumran. And anybody know the significance of Qumran? Dead Sea Scrolls, yep. So we were there. Next. Qumran, next. So this is where this little guy in 1947, I think it is, his goat got caught up there. And so he threw a stone up to get his goat down off there, and he heard this clay pot. And he's like, what was that? And he went up and he found these scrolls of Isaiah, and they are almost word for word. And so the Qumran community were known for writing out the scriptures and preserving the scriptures. That's what they were all about. So it was a huge archaeological find. Next. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, we were in our bus going to, I think, Masada, and you could see all of this desert and these big hills. And I got to thinking, and I was like, boy, when we think about like David hiding out or in a cave or whatever, I always just imagine green fields and caves here and there. And I got to look at it, and I'm like, boy, Mark, this is probably, this makes me think of when David was hiding out in the caves,
From Saul, yeah.
From Saul, and praying and crying out. So many of the Psalms make me think of this. And within about 2 minutes, Alon stood up and started to talk about David hiding in the caves. But I was like, yeah, it makes part of the scriptures come alive when you see the geography.
Next. And it's Bruce and Suzette again, and these are the caves right here. Next. Dead Sea. So we went to the Dead Sea. Next. So we went from Qumran up to the Dead Sea. Next. There we are floating. Yeah. And you legit float. You cannot not float. It's really weird. And if you've got a cut on your arm, you're going to know it, because that's salt. Whew, I'll tell you what. Next. So, okay, that's it. Let me just wrap things up. I appreciate your patience. This day has been a weird day all the way around. So if you're a visitor here today, forgive me. It's not normally like this, but I hope it was a help and encouragement to you. And this is why I wanted to do this. It's amazing to think about our tour guide Alon, who has been raised in this land, who knows the Bible better than most of us, in Old Testament and the New Testament. And yet he calls himself, I was astonished at the way he could quote the scriptures, including the New Testament. And I was astonished at the fact that he referred to himself as a pre-Easter believer. Do you know what that means? It means he doesn't believe in the resurrection. Now, I want to land the plane here, folks. Just because some people would ask me, oh man, now I bet you really have faith now that you've been to the land of Israel. Now you really have solidified your faith. No, not at all. My faith is not in land. My faith is not in a trip. My faith is not in seeing those sights. My friend Alon can be raised in that stuff and see it every day. He studied in Hebrew University. He saw it every day, and still he does not believe. There's a veil that's over his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, it is by faith that you are saved. That's how we're saved. It's a gift of God by his grace. And so I am grateful for the opportunity to go and see where Jesus walked. But if you walk out of here thinking, oh, I could never have the kind of faith that is necessary. Yes, you can. It is not dependent on your location. It's dependent on your heart. And have you turned your heart over to the Lord? Amen. Father, thank you for the opportunity that we have. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. We're just going to say goodbye. Let's stand and recite.